He was a tireless celebrity who upended what it meant to be an artist and completely redefined the artist's role in society. Indeed, the illustrious Andy Warhol cultivated an internationally recognizable aesthetic as a leading figure of the American pop art movement by merging visual culture with capitalism and associating himself with pretty much all the art forms New York City had to offer. He was even a foundational point of inspiration for none other than Donald Trump. More on that in a bit. As Warhol's celebrated retrospective at the Whitney Museum of American Art rages on, today's Several Circles episode examines one of, if not the most storied American artists there ever was. It's a daunting task to effectively summarize the imposing career of Andy Warhol, a man who just generated culture across fine art, film, music, television, and beyond. So where to begin? Well, first of all, Warhol was one of the pop art movement's most prominent contributors, but he didn't actually conceive of it. Pop art's origins are rather in 1950s Britain, born from a newfound fascination with the banal products that most ordinary homes were stocked with, though it was rooted in a particularly Americana brand of consumer culture. Artists like Richard Hamilton and Eduardo Pelosi are among the pioneers of British pop art, and they laid the groundwork for Warhol, together with the likes of Roy Lichtenstein, Robert Rauschenberg, and Jasper Johns, to develop their own stateside iterations. It was in the early 60s that Warhol created his first pop artworks, inspired by mass-produced commercial goods like Brillo pads, Coca-Cola, and of course, Campbell's soup cans. Part of Warhol's appeal, or for some people lack thereof, is the exalted, larger-than-life persona he constructed for himself. He possessed this superhuman image of a man so brilliant, so creative, so cool that he was practically untouchable. And he was all those things, but part of that identity was the protective armor he built following some childhood illnesses, and later in life, a near-fatal assault. Andy Warhol was born Andrew Warhola in 1928 to Slovakian parents in Pittsburgh. A neurological disorder causing skin pigmentation variations and involuntary muscle movements would flare up and render him bedridden, and in that time, he poured through comics and magazine advertisements. He'd go on to study at the esteemed Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, where he refined his skills as a draftsman and cultivated a printing technique by which he could systematically reproduce an image without any glaring alterations. This technique would inform his early career as a taste-making commercial illustrator. He moved to New York City in the late 40s, changed his name to Andy Warhol, and kicked off his reign as the city's cultural messiah with an illustration in Glamour magazine. The image accompanied a fortuitous piece about the definition of success, which in 1949, when it was published, was apparently living and working in New York. So he was off to a strong start, and his printing method allowed for quick and seamless revisions for his clients. Warhol eventually lost interest in that trajectory, though it would of course guide his fine art aesthetic, and pivoted towards something more revolutionary. After experimenting with comic strip-like paintings a la Roy Lichtenstein, Warhol created a seminal artwork comprised of 32 canvases, each bearing the same synthetic polymer painted Campbell's soup cans in 1962. That same year, he began his Death and Disaster series, a collection of morbid silkscreens based on newspaper clippings and photographs of car crashes, electric chairs, suicides, and race riots, as well as early portraits of Marilyn Monroe following the actress's death by overdose. The artist's willingness to not only delve into the realms of trauma and tragedy, but to do so with relentless, desensitized nonchalance exemplified the confluence of high art and cold, unflinching mass production. In a similar vein, it was at around the same time that he would also create assembly-line sculptures replicating Brillo boxes and Heinz ketchup bottles, famously stating, quote, "I want to be a machine." Warhol would soon take a break from traditional fine art forms in favor of experimentation with film. One of Warhol's most remarkable accomplishments was not only the way he manipulated the interplay of high and low art forms, but the extent to which he bled fine art into other cultural structures. His films, including 1964's Empire, which shows continuous monochrome footage of the Empire State Building for over 8 straight hours, and Chelsea Girls, which became Warhol's first commercial success in 1966, established the artist as a multidisciplinary force to be reckoned with, preempted what is now considered independent film, and spearheaded a lifelong series of collaborations with celebrities, socialites, and paramount cultural figures. Warhol added to his entourage with every move he made. His studio loft on East 47th Street became known as the Factory, where Warhol entertained his so-called superstars, an exclusive clique of trust funders, celebrities, musicians, artists, and other personalities who doubled as the subjects of Warhol's films and portraits. He schmoozed with Bianca Jagger and Liza Simonelli at Studio 54, he staged unprecedented performance pieces with the Velvet Underground. He co-designed the award-winning album cover for Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones. Warhol's output was unparalleled, though his machine status was compromised in 1968. He had recently moved his factory to Union Square when he was shot by Valerie Solanas, a radical feminist author with paranoid delusions that Warhol had stolen her work. Following extensive surgery on multiple vital organs, Warhol lived, but he remained shaken with deep emotional and physical scars for the rest of his life. After the attack, Warhol temporarily retreated and focused his attention on business matters, but he would soon come back with the esteemed Interview magazine in 1969, and he went on to appear in commercials, to produce music videos, and to host 2 cable shows, Andy Warhol's TV from 1980 to 1983, and Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes from 1985 to 1987, which referenced his famous quote, "In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. Kind of prophetic. Warhol was a brand in and of himself, one that the whole world seemingly wanted a stake in. In 1975, he published The Philosophy of Andy Warhol, From A to B and Back Again. He wrote, quote, "Being good in business is the most fascinating kind of art. Making money is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art," unquote. So who develops a fascination with Warhol but Donald Trump? After the incongruous pair met at a birthday party, Trump paid a visit to the factory and commissioned Warhol to create new work for Trump Tower. Warhol abided with a completed series of 8 glittery silkscreens, and long story short, it did not go well. Trump allegedly threw a temper tantrum over the lack of color coordination in the prints, and subsequently refused to pay up. But he bizarrely remained entranced by Warhol, who naturally found Trump cheap and distasteful following their unsuccessful business transaction. In his book entitled The Art of the Deal, Trump writes, quote, "Deals are my art form. Other people paint beautifully on canvas or write wonderful poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals," unquote. Sound familiar? So the whole Trump-Warhol thing never quite worked out, but Warhol collaborated with a wealth of influential New York City characters. Notably, in 1980, a young but fiercely confident Jean-Michel Basquiat approached Warhol in a Soho restaurant with a postcard of his work. Warhol would subsequently become Basquiat's confidant, friend, and most supportive champion in art and in health, urging his protege to curb his using. Very shortly after Warhol's unexpected death in 1987 from gallbladder surgery complications, Basquiat died from an overdose at the age of 27. Somewhat poetically, in 2017, Basquiat's Untitled, a painting of a skull with gnashing teeth, dethroned Andy Warhol's Silver Car Crash Double Disaster from his Death and Disaster series as the highest-fetching American artwork ever sold at auction. Warhol was busy with new work up until the very end. The 70s were largely dedicated to portraiture when he yielded paintings of celebrities, world leaders, and his mother, who passed away in 1972. He briefly revisited his commercial background in the 80s and produced a series of arresting self-portraits just before his death. Warhol's presence is still palpable in art and in the city. He was the original hipster, the heartbeat of New York in one of the city's most nostalgic and formative eras, and in a sense, he influenced the way contemporary artists mass-produce new work for the galleries that represent them. Whether or not that's regarded as a good thing, it ensures that there's always something new and for sale in any given exhibition space. So it's glaringly apparent that every stage of Warhol's life is worthy of extensive scholarship. If you'd like to learn more about Warhol beyond the very brief overview we've provided here, the good news is that he is perhaps the most meticulously documented artist, with a wealth of exhibition materials and monographs about his life and work, books and diaries that he authored, even time capsules from the 70s that he packed with letters and photographs, toys, medicines, articles of clothing, and more. Plus, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts and the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh are both fantastic resources. And don't miss the Whitney's landmark exhibition entitled Andy Warhol, From A to B and Back Again, on view from the museum's stunning outpost in the Meatpacking District until March 31st, 2019. This is Warhol's first comprehensive New York retrospective since 1989, if you can believe it, and it not only reconsiders Warhol in light of new research, but represents this timeless artist in a 21st century context where he's just as relevant as ever. Thanks for watching Several Circles. Please subscribe below for more videos about historic, modern, and contemporary artists with upcoming or current exhibitions in New York City.